don't know what we can talk about in this nation without talking about white superiority, honestly.
Who defines the meaning of God also defines the relationship between economy and God.
African Americans spent $1.3 trillion last year, making us the 16th wealthiest nation in the world. Why have we not turned those riches into wealth to develop our community?
Greetings, everyone. Peace. Shalom. Hotep. Assalamu alaikum. Definitely want to get a shout out to everyone here for being with us in another exciting episode of HAPI Talks. I'm your host, Taki Grant. And it's good to be back. It's been some time since I've been here. We've been very busy getting everything together with the HAPI screenings. Also, with the One Africa Return to the Source Conference and Study Tour in Kemet coming up in February. Wow, it's a lot of work. It's a lot been going on behind the scenes. Definitely shout out to Felicia for holding it down. It's been a long time. I think over a month since I've been here. I'm just happy to have the opportunity to be here tonight. We have a dynamic panel in store for you guys tonight. Can we vote our way to freedom? We know in our community we have these very polarizing views on voting. Some feel that the electoral arena is something that can help us. Others feel like it's a waste of time. But this panel here tonight, we're going to address it because we do understand that the pyramid analysis and economics, politics, and culture is something that is necessary for any institution, any race, any country, any kingdom, any company to function effectively. We must have those three essential components, and they must work in conjunction with one another. So to really understand that, we're going to dissect that a little bit tonight, get into it, and have a nice, fruitful discussion. But before we get into that, we want to talk about the upcoming screening this weekend in Philadelphia. It's going to be a powerful experience. We have an extraordinary panel that evening. We have Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Mfudishi Jehutimes, and Brother Jabari Osaze. Please go to hapifilm.com to get your tickets. There's still space available for those who want to come and attend this extraordinary event. We also have connected and worked with some grassroots organizations in Philadelphia. And this experience has been overwhelming because this allows us to really execute this HAPI movement in a real way and to work with other organizations, other people that want to collude with other Africans in for our liberation. So definitely want to give a shout out to Brother Shomari, who will be the host and moderator for that event on Saturday. A Philadelphia native. He's also on the panel tonight. A very powerful brother. So definitely want to give a shout out to him and all those who are in Philadelphia who will be a part of it. Also, Brother Omawali Africa, who's been working with us for some time. But he would be there, and he's also a big part of this. So definitely want to give a shout out to everyone in Philadelphia. And for those who do not have your tickets, please take this opportunity, hapifilm.com, to come to the screening this Saturday. Also, I see it on the screen here, the HAPI newsletter. Stay in touch with what we got going on. It's very important. Go get the newsletter. Sign up at hapifilm.com. Register for the newsletter. There's a lot of powerful information in there. We now have a current events article that's very important. Keep people current on things that are going on in the community. We spoke of the trip. There's still space available. iCareTours.com. Definitely want to go check that out. We have an extraordinary panel of presenters, 11 presenters from Dr. Theophila Benga, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Dr. Roslyn Jeffries, Dr. Wade Nobles, Dr. Vera Nobles, Professor James Moore, Mfudishi Jehutimes, Anthony Browder, Asar Hotep, and Dr. Solange Ashby. Definitely want to be a part of that. That's going to be a historical event. But listen, without any further ado, we want to bring in our guests and get this show started. We have with us Councilmember Scott Benson from Detroit. How you doing, brother? How's everything?
Hey, Taki. Good evening. How are you this evening?
I'm doing well. This is, I think, the first time you and I have been on the show together. And we want to just, if you can, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So Scott Benson, Detroit City Councilman, Northeast side of Detroit, 3rd District. I've been on the Detroit City Council for 7 years and 9 months. My third election, second re-election, will occur next Tuesday. So we are in full swing in campaign mode, trying to make things happen out here in the city of Detroit. Huge economic development proponent and advocate. For me, it's all about jobs, and more jobs. So that's something we've been very successful at. Been able to bring over $500 million of investment to my district, over 1,000 jobs, and actually closer to 2,000 jobs now. After we just brought another 1 million square feet of a logistics center online in the 3rd District, and so just really excited about what we're doing and how we're able to do it, and how we're able to grow the general fund in the city of Detroit and make sure that our pocket is correct here in Detroit. We've had some challenges in the past. So
Okay.
it's really excited.
I want you to put a pin in that because that's going to be part of the discussion, how economics and politics work. And you spoke of jobs and, you being a part of that. So definitely want to talk to you about that. We also want to introduce Brother Shomari. Peace, my brother. How you feeling tonight?
I'm good yourself, Brother Saki. Thanks for having
All right.
me.
Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you've been doing with us. Really greatly appreciate it. You want to just take a brief minute and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Eric Grimes, Brother Shomari. Like you said, I'm a Philly native, and just looking forward to the conversation. Want to get into this merger of politics and economics and culture and how it all needs to come together. And I just look forward to the dialogue.
Right. The irony of this is these are the first two cities on our tour. We did Detroit about a month ago, and now we're about to emerge and do Philly, and we have representatives from both cities here. The spirit of this conversation came from a dialogue that Brother Shomari and I had on his radio show, and he was speaking of just how important economics and politics is and how from a grassroots level we need to understand that. So I said, wow, we really need to get into this discussion. So I want to thank you for being here tonight. Without no further ado, and last but definitely not least, we got Dr. Leonard Jeffries, our resident scholar. How you feeling, Dr. Jeffries?
Certainly, I feel as African as I can be, and so that's always a good sign. I got rid of my whiteness years ago, and I'm making a suggestion that most of you all need to get rid of whiteness and get into your African, bag, get into your African shoes, get into your African mindset. And so that would be the message that I would want to raise in question of voting and politics and whatnot. We expect you to be Africans, even though it's hard to fit into that formulation, but it's what we need for the future.
Thank you for that, Dr. J. Before we get started this show, family, please do us a favor, do everyone a favor, and share this video. Definitely want to like it. It's super important. Like the video. We have a significant amount of people in the building right now, and the likes are relatively low. We definitely want to like the video, and share it, and also leave a comment. Definitely want to give a shout out to everyone that's in the audience right now. Peace and Black power to you. So this conversation we have here, can we vote ourselves our way to freedom? That's a very interesting discussion. And Honorable Scott Benson, we're going to start with you. In your opinion, and I got a feeling what you're going to say about this, but does voting really matter?
Well, the fact that I'm a professional politician, elected official legislator, I'm going to say yes. Voting really does matter. Democracy, voting, the electorate determines who gets what, when, where, why, and how. I have the ability to determine who gets resources within the city of Detroit. That is very, very important. It is not everything, though. There are still shortcomings when a community has political power but doesn't have economic power. And that's one of the things I think we see here in the city of Detroit. So I'm going to say yes, it's critical to have the vote.
Okay. So the opposite side of that coin, the argument is that as Black people, we're not always getting our fair share. So for Black people being disenfranchised, what would you tell them in regards to why voting matters?
So I mean, that's loaded, and I have to know what scenarios you're talking about. And so even in the city of Detroit, where you have an 80% black city, you have out of at one time 9 council persons, 7 were black and 5 were female. Um, Still able to get the resources to the community, but there's still people who feel that they're not being heard. They feel that their voices aren't heard, that they're not being prioritized. So I mean, there's still going to be issues and problems. You also have a group of people who feel fully heard, and that their voices are being heard and they're being prioritized as well. So it's really going to depend on who your constituent base is and who you're speaking to. But for me, if you're feeling that you're not being heard, you have to be willing to talk to elected officials as well. And oftentimes, and I see this all the time, people will come and complain to me. I say, have you ever reached out to me? Have you ever called my office? Have you ever sent me an email? Have you ever come down to public comment and talked about what your concerns are? And oftentimes the answer will be no, but I'm mad. And so I always tell people, call me. Don't just sit at home mad and stewing in the problem. Let me know and give me the opportunity to solve your issue and see what I can do. I work for you. You are my boss. If you are part of the electorate, I have about 95,000 bosses in my district. Probably 10,000 of them vote. So in a municipal election. So you got 10,000 of the people making decisions for the 90,000. Get out and vote and make sure that your elected official, even if you don't vote, knows what your issues are and give them an opportunity to support you or give an opportunity to not support you. And then you can go and vote them out of office or run yourself.
Okay.
I hope I answers the question a little bit.
No, you did, and I hope you didn't feel like you were being put on the spot.
I am, but it's okay. This is my job.
No, so one of the things is we just have to give the both sides of the argument, and we do understand addressing the conversation at hand. Can we vote ourselves to freedom? A lot of black people don't feel like we can, and I, as being the expert politician on the panel, just wanted to have your view on that.
Taki, can I just add one last item? And so when you say vote ourselves to freedom, give me the definition of freedom here. When you say freedom, what do you mean?
And that's a loaded word in terms of what we're looking at, but more so to power. Mm-hmm. To power and to access to more resources, mm-hmm. into what people would consider the American dream. Oftentimes in our community, we don't seem like we have that opportunity.
So I got to just add then. So you can't just solely vote yourself to power. You have to have education. You've got to have health. You also have to have economics. You have to have the money. And I say in the city of Detroit, we have the political power, but we don't have the economic power. So we don't have complete control. You have to have the economic power, at least in my opinion, and the political power. I just see so many people who have put themselves in positions where they have the education, where they're able to have the fantastic jobs, but they also know how to utilize a political system to help derive resources to where they want them to go. And so there's a two-edged sword there, and you need to have a sharp edge on both sides.
Okay, thank you. So, Brother Shomari, what are your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts are on the question of can voting lead us to freedom? That would be an emphatic no for me. And again, I'm assuming we're talking about voting in the context of us as Black people situated in America. If I were in an independent, sovereign African country and we were voting, okay, that's a different conversation. But in this context, can voting lead us to freedom? I don't even know that in 2021 needs to even be a debatable discussion for us at this point. Depending on freedom in this truest sense of the word, the answer is no. Does it matter? That's a separate question. And I think the answer to that is it depends. That's a strategic, conditional situation. And I'm one who believes that there may be some strategic conditional situations where the vote can deliver an outcome that forwards our movement. So I'm not one who says under no circumstances should we not vote. But I do believe that in many ways, that's a strategic kind of incremental step situation where it may be applicable, particularly at the local and state level, where there is an issue about resources and where they go in that allotment. But as it relates to us who are thinking about sovereignty and freedom, participation in the electoral voting process as it is right now, I don't know that delivers freedom for us.
Okay. So I just want to just go briefly into your background, and correct me if I'm wrong. You have experience in the working in the Philadelphia City Council, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you just speak?
I was a communication specialist and a policy analyst. My master's is in urban policy analysis and economics from Morehouse and the New School up in New York. So I've been on the inside and the outside. I've seen how the sausage gets made, and this is from that perspective. I agree with the councilman from Detroit. With the stroke of a pen, your elected officials control millions, if not billions of dollars. That's a true statement. But I've also know that the people who have influence over them are not necessarily their voters and constituents. They sign for the people who they fear have power over them. And we need to put more effort into getting power than participating. I think we fixate on participating and we've lost sight of the power that determines whether that participation matters. And so, again, in strategic situations, I think that there might be a reason to participate, particularly if you have an agenda. We're voting, even those of us who participate, often without an agenda. So we don't even know whether we win or lose based on how we voted. We just say, okay, somebody looked like us, they should have done right by us. But if you have no agenda, you don't even know what right and wrong is. And so we're very immature, even in the way we participate at this time.
Thank you. Dr. Leonard Jeffries, looking at a historical context and what we as African Americans went through in this country to obtain rights to vote, what are your thoughts on where we are now in terms of the people who were a part of those drives and the thoughts people have today?
Well, certainly I would want to add some of my analysis and experience being the elder among the presenters. I'm celebrating or heading for my 85th Earth Day. And so it's been wonderful to have this enormous experience, not only in the American context, but in the African, South American, Caribbean context, and certainly in the global context. So I think there are limitations to what we can expect from the struggle for the vote and its significance in relationship to our freedom, but it's a necessary part of what I refer to as systems analysis. Nothing is going to occur meaningfully in terms of an agenda that you have without a system capability. It may be something that somebody else's system gives to you, and so that you can say by participating in someone else's system, we have the right to do this and we have the responsibility of getting this and that done. But a political system is absolutely necessary if we're going to have the most important function in our world is economics. Economics is your ability to organize your world, and politics becomes that process that helps you organize it. And so without the economic foundation, we're not going anywhere. And without the politics that relates to it, we're only going to a limited space and place. And so we need to think through this whole approach that I learned early on as a young individual intending to become a lawyer for the NAACP. And the motto for me was Thurgood Marshall, the civil rights giant that broke down some barriers. But it was clear after being in the political arena around the world that you need your foundation. Nothing occurs if you don't have that economic foundation. But if you don't have a system to manage that economic foundation, which is your creative, productive capability, everything, every group, every organization, every movement has to have an economic capability. Otherwise, it's going to fail. So that I don't want to get into politics in terms of the niceties of a Declaration of Independence or whatever. But politics for me is managing your life. And so that you can't leave it to other people because their interests are going to be premier. You have a perfect example in terms of a Detroit, for example. You have the metropolitan Detroit, the city of Detroit, the metropolitan Detroit, and then you have satellite cities. You got Dearborn. That's a special economic entity that has become an ethnic political entity. And then you got Hamtramck and Highland Park right in the middle of this enormous modernized urban area, which comes as a result of the technology of the automobile and manufacturing, et cetera. So Detroit is a special phenomenon. Newark, New Jersey, a special phenomenon economically. So we need to see how we can interrelate the capability for economic and politics to relate to freedom. Freedom is a very vague concept. You have the freedom to be a part of a larger entity, or you can remove yourself from it and travel somewhere else. But in order for us to go up against the forces that are arrayed against us, and that puts in place that third component, economics, politics, and culture. That third component is people learn how to use the politics to serve them. And I've studied the various economic groups. That's the PhD. Before the PhD was the honors in my BA, and that was on the urban crisis in America. So I spent the year traveling across the country studying these economic communities, and every ethnic group was solid around its interests, and they were fighting for its interests. And if you're not going to be in the arena to fight for your interests, you're not going to go very far. But if you have a larger interest, which is to pull a coalition of people together, then you really talk about how you manage yourself in this great struggle for place and space and an agenda for your people. And if we look at the great movements, I'll just say this, of our people, when they took leaps forward, you had an assembly of the people meeting and planning and thinking on a global scale. You had the Fifth Pan-African Conference in Manchester, England, where several hundred Black people from the different spectrums of our life came together, including W.E.B. Du Bois as the head of the Fifth Pan-African Conference. And his assistant and the secretary was Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. So here you had two great brothers representing politics, economics, and the struggle for Black folk. And then you had the female contribution. The wife of Marcus Messiah Garvey was in the mix. And then Africans came from Trinidad, Tobago. They came from South America, the Guyanas, and they came from the U.S. So to limit yourself to just the American frame of reference, limits yourself in terms of your reach. So I like to think in terms of a Pan-African formulation where various views come together, the various ideas, and they struggle with each other to produce the dynamite that's necessary to break down the walls that are holding us back and produce an agenda. One brother coming up from Mississippi, he happened by accident to be a Morehouse man, but he broke the control over his mind in terms of Mississippi and the miseducation in his youth. And then he came on to Morehouse and he survived the Morehouse socialization and the process of the achieving Negro. And then he went on to New York and he had to deal with that dynamic mix of ethnic groups and powers in New York. And that is New York. And he was able to deal with the secular education, but more important than that, the Catholic Church has a grand socialization and whatnot that he survived. And so he broke forth and he encouraged African peoples to organize, and he produced a great book called Blueprint for Black Power. And I'm talking about Dr. Amos Wilson.
Hey, Doc, thank you for that. We're going to come back to you in 1 second. We got with us right now, Brother Jabari Osaze. How you doing, sir? How's everything?
Oh, I am absolutely ecstatic to be here and to talk about this really important topic. I just came from teaching a class and jumped in and said, ooh, this is tasty. This is an important conversation. I've had so many conversations with folks about the importance of, or lack of importance of, voting. And I know that some folks might know me as a Kemetic priest and a historian, but I've been involved in politics on the community level in New York City for 30 years. You know, I even have had some appointed positions in Harlem's management. I ran the land use committee of Central Harlem. So anyway, I just want you to recognize that I want to say something really simple for some folks who might not necessarily understand the context of voting. If the Black vote was not important, our enemies would not work so hard to take it away from us. If the Black vote was not important, our enemies would not work so hard to take it away from us. And I want us to truly understand that it is one of the battlegrounds that we must become involved in. Now, sometimes people make it sound like if voting doesn't do everything, we shouldn't do anything with the vote. And I hope that we will never have such a simplistic understanding. You should understand that if economics was the only saving grace, then Black Wall Street would be here and thriving today. We have to understand that there are several different spokes on this wheel. One of them is, of course, economic viability. Of course. Another one, the controversial one that Jabari gets into all the time, is our spiritual life. We have to now control our spiritual life and see our spiritual connection from an African's perspective. And of course, we must also remain in control of the politics of our community. Some folks forget that there are many people who believe that the Emancipation Proclamation is what freed the enslaved African. First of all, that story, that is really not understanding the context of that story at all. But I hope you understand that the Emancipation Proclamation was considered perhaps illegal. And so after the Civil War, at the end of the Civil War, we see a lot of jockeying to pass several amendments. If our political power was irrelevant, there would be no need for the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. These have to actually be ratified by at least 3/4 of the states. We must understand that our political power is key. This is one of those things that I hope people understand. I want to share an image real quick if I can. Taki, can I do this real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Real quick. I'm fired up. You got me fired up on this conversation. Here is an early depiction of Southern whites trying to force Black folks to vote the way that they demanded. This is a continual issue. And we're going to see very similar struggles occur in places all over the United States. Look at the struggle that's going on in Atlanta right now over a Senate seat. They even took a sellout Negro off the bench to come and fight against Raphael Warnock, Herschel Walker, who has a horrible history of domestic violence. But they said, look, he's Black. Maybe Black people will be confused and they'll vote for him and not for Raphael Warnock. The Black vote is critical. Now, that does not mean that politics is about simply voting, because if we think that voting is the be-all and end-all of politics, we still don't understand what we must do. We have to be in control of the choices. And then we need to back the choices that support a Black agenda. and then we need to vote. Sometimes people get really disillusioned about voting because they think that voting is the only part of politics. Well, voting is a selection of choices that have been placed in front of you. If you've waited simply to vote, then other people will control those choices and your vote will be irrelevant. So it is of critical importance for us to recognize that we should actually be putting forward individuals that speak for the needs of our community. And I don't know if Dr. J has mentioned this yet, because I'm coming from a class I didn't hear this, but Dr. J has had his heart, his mind, and his soul into one of the most important Black representatives in the United States. I'm talking about someone who was in the leadership, the national leadership of this country, Hakeem Jeffries. And I know that he put work into the mind of that young man. So let's please understand how important this is. And I'm so pleased to be here for this conversation. I'm going to stop because I could talk for an hour. I'm going to stop here talking.
Well, no, we appreciate that. Honorable Scott Benson, would you like to chime in on that? You're muted.
Muted. So there's a lot there, but I think some of the things I talked about earlier, I think we share some of those similar philosophies. A couple of people here this evening. Number one, that politics is important. The vote is very, very important, but it's not everything. I mean, you have to have more than that. And I keep saying this, and this is just from my own personal observation. So it's just my own anecdote. But you have to have the economics, and people will talk about other things that are very, very important. But for me, you've got to have the economics, and just because it is so difficult to get people elected if you just don't have the money behind it. And so people may say that's wrong and that's terrible. But if you want to pay for a mailer, if you want to pay for people to go out and knock doors, if you want to pay for a TV commercial, you have to have the financial resources to make that happen, which to me also says that if you want to make sure that your person gets into that seat, you got to have the money to back them. And oftentimes, and I see this in my own community, we do not like to support elected officials. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And then you will see in many cities where the people who are supporting the elected officials do not look like the members of the community that those elected officials come from. And so there is a bit of a disparity there. So I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but I really do like to see the people who are supporting elected officials look like those elected officials, and that way you have a better you'll have a better chance that they're going to look after your best interest and not the best interest of those who are backing them financially.
Thank you for that.
And that's part of the sausage making of this business. And so, and as Brother Shomari says, there's a whole lot of sausage making going on when it comes to politics. And if you don't like the sausage making process, it's probably not a business for you. Everybody likes to taste the sausage. They just don't like to make it.
Okay. Dr. J, before Jabari came on, you were talking about a blueprint for Black Power. One of the questions I have for you is in respect to, have we as Black people historically been using this arena in a meaningful way?
Well, unfortunately, it's unfortunate that a larger analysis is not made in terms of politics. We usually focus politics around an individual concern or a specific group concern, but it's a larger issue. And for me, it moves into the area of culture writ large, that if you don't have a culture of participating in your own interests, if you don't have a culture of mobilizing and organizing the groups that are key and crucial to your cultural interests being protected and sustained, then you're left to someone else's circumstance and their particular approaches. I've grown up in an ethnic mix in Newark, New Jersey. Same type of ethnic mix that's in Baltimore, same type of ethnic mix that's in Philadelphia and our northern cities and our Midwestern cities. And ethnic groups are organized. The Italian community has a political structure that speaks to their needs. The Jewish community has a political structure and interest that speaks to their needs. The Irish community the same way. And now with the groups coming in from the South, Latin American groups, they're functioning around their interests and their needs. And so we get confused often as we're part of the great American experiment. No, you're not. You've been left out in the cold for so long. You should know that you're not. You forced your way in. You've made a meaningful attempt to be a part of it. But this system was structured for rich white men with property and power to use their particular bases of power to mobilize interest to service various white groups, and in many instances deny the African peoples, the Latin peoples, and certainly the biggest denial of all has been the Native Americans. Native Americans, this land was theirs. It was taken from them clearly in one of the worst pillages in the history of humankind and one of the greatest genocides. And they're close to us in terms of many of the things that we would want to do together, but they don't have the cultural dynamic. They don't have the political dynamic to speak to their interests. This whole nation was theirs, and now they only have bits and pieces of it. So, and how many of the Native American population was devastated? And then even the poor buffaloes roaming the plains of this environment called America. I mean, 1 million or so were killed in order to get at the Native American population. The buffaloes were wiped out. Smallpox blankets and whatnot was part of the machinery used against Black folk and Native Americans and others. So we need to look at a larger picture. And so I think the question that you raise is a good one. It should open up our eyes to things that we need to do and we have to do, and the history that we are a part of.
Thank you, Dr. J. One of the reasons, another reason why we're having this discussion is because the HAPI movement, or the HAPI film in itself, was built on the principles of economics, politics, and culture. The film was designed, the framework for the film was put together with those three principles in mind. So with that, we have a clip from the film we'd like to show right now that actually addresses or even kind of adds some insight to this discussion, or just kind of speak to some of the points that were already made.
The blueprint for economic development and empowerment for Black people is twofold. One, we have to get into Black nationalism. I firmly believe that. We got to pull our trillion-dollar consumer resources together and produce the things that we're consuming. While we're doing that, pulling our resources together, taking over the institutions economically, buying up the land, we need to start community land trusts. Those are not-for-profit corporations that can get the government to give you land, like they're giving it to the private developers. Then we need to pull our resources and do things like the Nation of Islam is doing, and other Black nationalist groups, buying up land, buying up real estate in our neighborhoods, and build a community economy. That's road number one. Road number two, while we're doing that, take over the politics.
That was New York State Assembly member Charles Barron. Definitely want to give a big shout out, Madase P, to him for his contribution to HAPI. And before we move on, just want to again let everyone know, please comment on the video. You hear this right now. We have a very powerful discussion going. Please share it. And also, if anyone who's interested in helping out the cause, they can donate the Super Chat or the Cash App, $on hapifilm, excuse me. Definitely want to keep this moving, keep this going. So, Brother Shomari, in your opinion, what does a good political model look like?
Well, I think the core for me, as I'm listening to the conversation, is important because we say it, but I don't know that we hold it, is that you can't pull any one element out of the system that we're talking about. If we're going to talk about the convergence of politics, economics, and culture, and I would add that there's some other things that need to go in there as well, like military and all of that stuff. It's a system. And I think that sometimes we think we can talk about economics and say, oh, it's economics and economics is first, or it's politics and politics is first, or it's culture and culture is first. It doesn't work that way. It's like like a car is a system. And the engine, though we might want to talk about how important the engine is, it doesn't matter if there's no fuel in the car. It doesn't matter if the spark plug is not doing its job or So we really got to begin to look at this a little more holistically than I think we do. When we start to segment these things and try to prioritize them, I think that's the source of our defeat. So that's just one thing I want to say. You know, I'm a student of economics, and we got to remember that economics is the buzzword. It's political economy. They always go together. And so you look right. You have a company like Tesla, which just hit a $1 trillion valuation, probably the shortest time any company from its origin to hitting that valuation has ever happened. Right? How? Because literally you have a political movement that's saying we want to move away from fossil fuel. We want to move away from gas, oil. Biden is talking about putting in legislation that by the year 2030, creating cars, cars will have to be produced that are primarily electric, right? So you have a political legislative agenda that is literally creating an economy. We see it right now with COVID, right? Literally, COVID and vaccine mandates have created economies for Pfizer and Moderna. So we're behind the game here when we're trying to say, oh, it's all of these things. And the thing that binds all of these things, that system together, is Black power. We don't have a Black power system that binds all of these actors together. And to me, that is the focus. When we're talking, like the question I was asked to weigh in on is, can voting, I want to get it right because I want to stay in my lane. Can we vote our way to freedom? And the answer is, see, we have an experiment that started with the 14th Amendment up until now that lets us know that the answer to that is no. If we have 100+ year experiment, this is already answered. We can rewrite the rules all we want to. History has already shown us the answer to that question. Voting and politics, though, are not the same thing. And that's one of the conversations I really want us to get to. We have been conditioned to think that our way and primary way as Black people in a situation of oppression in the land that we have no vested interest in. You know, we could argue that. But we've been taught that the way we need to participate in politics is through the vote. And I am saying that might be, if our quest is for freedom and power, that's like the Glinda the Good Witch telling Dorothy to go to Oz, when at the end of the day, Dorothy should have went the hell home. And so we're prioritizing a pursuit down this yellow brick road that is only going to lead us to a wizard that actually has no power. And he really has no power for us. I just want to read this and make it very clear, and I'll be quiet. I don't care whether you're a local politician, a state politician, federal politician. Everybody takes an oath that has some version of these words in it. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state or locality, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of this office to the best of my ability. We live in a land whose constitution at the federal, state, and local level is predicated on our bondage. And the people who we say we vote for take an oath to uphold that constitutional structure. Strategically, there may be moments when we vote because there's something we want to leverage at the end of our vote. But as a principle towards our freedom, the oath tells you that's not the way we go. In 2021, I'm not sure why we're still unclear about that reality.
Thank you for that. Brother Jabari, you'd like to weigh in on this?
There we go. Yeah, absolutely. I think that Brother Shomari is saying something extremely important here. I think that when we try to disaggregate all of the tools of our survival, we absolutely miss the point that in and of themselves, none of them work. And I have heard many people say that we should just focus on our economic life. And I always say to them, what happened to in Greenwood? What happened? What happened to Black Wall Street? There were many, many, many places that were self-sufficient Black towns. Mound Bayou, Nicodemus, over 50 of them around the United States. And many of them were destroyed. Am I saying that we should not look after our financial health, our economic health? Absolutely not. It is of critical importance, but we have to come at this from a multifaceted perspective. And so I will agree with him that there is no way for us to vote ourselves towards our freedom, because that would be, using his analogy, like having a car, purchasing a car, and you get there and you see that it has a great engine and no transmission. There are no seats. You're like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? So all of these tools need to work together. Now, the part of the question you asked is, what does a Black agenda look like? What does a Black political struggle look like? And I want to be really clear that if I had a really glib answer for you right now, I probably wouldn't recognize that there will be nuances in local areas that don't exist in other areas. The most important thing for us to do is to gather groups of people of African descent to speak to their material needs very, very clearly. And as we create these groupings, these committees, these networks of people, then after we decide what that agenda should be, and there are also going to be some common things, I think, regardless, all around the country. But when we decide what that agenda will be, then we apply the politician. Then we find someone who was either already elected that is willing to work with our agenda, or we just decide from amongst us that someone should be the person that will be the face of that agenda and hold their feet to the fire. One of the things that my wife and I did very often some years ago is we would find that there were some politicians that we thought were doing things that were beneficial to the people of Central Harlem. And you know what we would do? We wouldn't just go to the voting booth and pull the lever. We would invite them to our house with our friends and throw fundraisers for them. This gets back to what the Honorable Brother Benson says. And I remember one of those politicians coming and saying, I want to be able to come here because I don't want to have to take money from the real estate folks that are coming in and buying things in Harlem. But the reality is, if I'm going to stay here and do some good, I'm going to need to be able to finance my campaigns. That's just the harsh reality that we have to face. And so all of these things must work together in order for us to move forward in power. We must focus on our political health just as much as we focus on our economic health and our spiritual health and all of the other spokes on that wheel that must be the African descended community.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Thank you, Audrey Wilson, for the generous donation. Family, please like, comment, and share. Very important. That doesn't cost anything. Please get this message out. Please like, comment, and share. Honorable Scott Benson, would you like to chime in on that?
Sure. I'm a firm believer. The politics have to be joined with the economics and other essential items that I said earlier, health. I mean, there are just so many things. It can't work by itself. But also, if you look at other successful communities around the country and around the world and what they've done to put themselves into positions of power or positions of influence, the politics are there, but the economics are also there as well. And it doesn't mean that they have their own separate political party. They can work within existing political parties, but they make sure that their interests are being observed and being looked after. And typically for me, it's the economics that put you in a position to make those type of demands. And so if you look at a community that says runs the media industry, they don't have their own separate political party, but they've made their presence known in one of our two dominant political parties, and they make sure that their interests are looked after. And their economic resources drive the conversation and drive policies to support their communities. So for me, you can have your own political party, but why build that infrastructure? I mean, that is generations of work, pain, and suffering. Utilize the infrastructure that's already there, but make sure that that infrastructure looks after your best interest. Now, you can say the Democratic Party, we throw all of our weight, I won't say all of it, but a 95% of our weight goes behind the Democratic Party. Now, are the Dems, and I am a proud Dem, do the Dems always look after our best interest? I would say no. Are we driving the Democratic Party economically? Probably not, but we drive it with our votes. Without our votes, we would not have a Democratic president today, and he knows it. And he picked a black female to ensure that he showed respect to our community. But are the policies supporting us? Are the economics being driven our way? So I'm going to say probably not all the time. So what are we doing to make sure that we leverage our votes and our power? And we say $1.6 trillion of spending power in the United States. What are we doing to make sure that those economics are being leveraged, and the political power, the policies, the advocacy, the executive actions that are needed to run our municipalities, run our states, run the federal government are supporting us? You got to be prepared to throw your weight and throw your might, and your vote helps, but you also need to have the economic ability to drive the conversation when it comes to our political parties.
Thank you for that, sir. Much appreciated. And shout out to Kepra L for this statement. Definitely shout out to that. Appreciate it. Very powerful statement. Dr. Leonard Jeffries, what we've been hearing over the past 10 minutes is essentially something that you've been teaching for several decades. Could you please elaborate and tell us just how important the pyramid analysis is?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you and the others around you who have been able to take the HAPI phenomena and move it into such important areas so we can have discussions like this from various spokespersons. And that will also help us come together collectively to put piece by piece, movement by movement, organization by organization, waves of activity to put our agenda in place. Everyone operates around an agenda. It's not, that's going somewhere. And so when I studied the history of this country and the various ethnic groups and their activity, and studied African countries with my master's, and then studied the PhD in terms of the larger issues of the African world, it's clear that a process is necessary that we have to be very conscious of, and it will be resisted, but it is necessary for us to be fortified for a long distance engagement. And then when we look at the history, you can see the Black Power movements that we had in this nation in order to make our voices heard, and then to follow it up with the whole series of activities that I've been involved in over these last few years, where we had organizations, the National Council for this, the National Council for that. And then, of course, we have this Greek letter process in which various institutions have a collectivity of the Divine Nine, of the sororities as with the fraternities. And then, of course, even in our church development, it's diverse, and it involves many different branches of either Christianity, Islam, or Judaism. But we have to be able to pull these various forces and sources of our future together into a very meaningful approach and movement, such as the Garvey movement and such as the movement in the streets of America. My nephew Hakeem's brother, Hassan, Morehouse graduate, Duke graduate, and his work, his publication was The Struggle for the Vote in Lowndes County. And that involved looking at the political dynamic that he was given kudos, in other words, doing a good job those who were involved in the day-to-day struggle didn't have time to see the analysis that was needed and was a part of it. And so Dr. Hassan Kwame Jeffries has left a work that can be studied. And he's worked with others like Charles Hamilton, who wrote Black Power, another book looking at this whole Black Power phenomena that we have had. And of course, internationally, there's been a whole well of organizations, African Heritage Studies Association, the ASCAC organization, mainly Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization, of course, the Black social workers, the Black psychologists, and Black major organizations around labor and whatnot. So we need to find a unity formula, and discussions like this help us along the way. And the reality is, Frederick Douglass said it best: if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess the favor of freedom yet deprecate agitation are men and women who want the crops without taking up the ground. They want the rain without the thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. And so we have to be prepared not to have an easy time, but a difficult time. And so we can try to prevent and avoid the Black Wall Street and the other similar situations that are real when jealousy and envy and actual hate, disdain, part of the American experience manifests itself. And we have to find the unity formula to make sure we can block it and then find our unity and our path.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Real quick, before we move on, I just want you to reiterate the name of the book that Hassan Jeffries wrote.
Bloody Lowndes, The Struggle for the Vote in Lowndes County. And that's when the term Black Power became utilized by Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, and his partners as they marched in the South, firming up the struggle and trying to get people to find unity so they would not fear the Klan and the other terrorist organizations. It takes a whole psychological fortification that's necessary to keep us on the struggle path to make it real. And you have to be prepared to sacrifice the life. Malcolm gave his life in the struggle. Dr. King gave his life in the struggle. A host of our sisters and others gave their life in the struggle. And so we have to take those histories and make them empowerment processes for us.
Thank you. One of the things we've been talking about, obviously, is economics, politics, and culture. In HAPI, we have a segment in the film that we have a line of very powerful discussions, people adding in their analysis of what that looks like. And I just want to play that clip because that really, for me, it drives home the point that's been made over the last 20 minutes.
Economics and politics are the foundation of human development.
When we think of economics, we think of ecology. The word comes from ecology, eco. It means the wealth within the ecology and the environment where you live. How do you harvest that wealth?
Both economics and politics are the study of who gets what, when, where, and why. With economics, the theory is that the market is the one that's doing the distribution. With politics, it's law that does the distribution. So with economics, theoretically, the price would determine who got what, who had the most money, etc. With politics, who was able to essentially rig the rules their way. So that we've seen in politics with law, certain crops being elevated over others, the government choosing to purchase surplus, all kinds of, but again, it's a study of who gets what, when, where, and why, how the pie gets divided.
Well, politics determines who gets what economically by policy decisions and by budget appropriations. For instance, if I were mayor of New York City, I have control over $85 billion budget. I do the spending on that. And over a $15 billion contracting budget by the city. So whoever controls the contracts, which is the mayor and certain agencies, city agencies, that's municipal level, this happens on a state and a federal level, can control who's going to be rich and who's going to be poor, who's going to be included and who's going to be excluded. So if I'm mayor and you have a toilet paper company and I have over 1,000 schools that need toilet paper, you get the contract, you're a millionaire. If you have a vending service and I'm the mayor and you get the contract, you're a millionaire. Textbook company, millionaire. Test-taking design, millionaire.
Economics and politics are the essence of a capitalistic society. And so if you think about some of the things that have happened in this country, you go back to the political policies that have been put in place that allows for commerce to happen. And it's one of the reasons you find such power in the Secretary of Treasury, such power in the Secretary of Commerce, because those policies actually translate in how business happens in this country.
Thank you for putting that clip up there, Sister Felicia. Definitely want to give a shout out to Seed Heru, Robbie Gay, Tahuti Films, for assisting in the co-production of HAPI. Couldn't have made it without them. That's very important. Definitely want to give that acknowledgement. And for those who have not seen the film and who live in the cities we will be coming to, please take this opportunity to go get your tickets, hapifilm.com. If you don't feel comfortable just yet coming out, being in groupings of people, you can always go to the website, hapifilm.com, also, and get a DVD or a digital copy. Councilmember Benson, after hearing what we've heard and seeing, watching that clip, does it appear the blueprint that we have is relatively simple, or in your opinion, as a politician, where are we going? Where are we going wrong? Is it a simple process of where are we going wrong after seeing this blueprint that was pretty much laid out? It seemed pretty simple from watching the clips in the film and what everyone has been discussing, but where are we going wrong?
I try to convey it, but I think we're not prioritizing the economics. We prioritize the politics in many of our communities, but we don't prioritize the economics. We just have to prioritize. We really need to focus on how we get our people and our community in a position of economic power, where we control the means of production, where we have the ability to hire, where we have the ability to put people in positions to create policies that support our means of production. We need to be in that position, and we don't often put ourselves there. I believe we really need to focus on that. Taki, I think you muted.
Thank you. As always, please like, comment, and share. Definitely want to do that. And please don't hesitate to show your support. It's very important. The people we have behind the scenes produce things like the HAPI newsletter, people that are part of the team. And we always want to make sure that everyone is getting a bite of the pie. And speaking of economics and politics, that is the way as this small organization of group functions. We function in that spirit. Brother Shomari, same question.
That's the question, right? It was referenced earlier. Baba ancestor Amos Wilson wrote a book, and many people look at it as an economic treatise, but it's actually, the title of the book is Blueprint for Black Power. And where we go wrong is that we are not bringing power to the actions that we say are important. I live in Philadelphia, man, and the people who have power in our city, they ain't voting. Like y'all, black people vote a lot in Philadelphia, and we don't get a lot out the deal. And so I just watched a group of people who do vote here in Philadelphia, our Haitian brothers and sisters. They got sent the hell back where they came from the Democratic president that we supposedly put in office and felt like it wasn't no power behind our demands, so he ain't owe us nothing. And at the same time, I watched some Afghan refugees get wherever you want to live, and they don't vote. We got this thing, and sometimes you just got to look at the experiment and you log your notes, and sometimes you got to let the truth and the observations be what it is. We vote a lot as Black people, not only across America. We've been voting in South Africa. We've been voting in Nigeria. We've been voting in Haiti and Jamaica. It has not produced power. So clearly, that correlation between voting and freedom is a faulty correlation. So we need to now step back and say, what did we get wrong there? Because clearly voting does not lead to freedom, because we voting all across the globe as Black people. We are doing it and it's not producing money. Everybody said, Black people got votes. We got a lot of money. We always talk about this $1 trillion. We got a lot of Jesus and we got a lot of dreams. And yet we still don't have power. So at some point, we got to look at the experiment that we're engaged in and saying, you know what? The way we've laid out this algorithm does not lead to the outcome that we prophesied or predicted that it was. Maybe we need to course correct. And the biggest thing we need to understand that the glue really of it all is power. You can't take any aspect of the power from the system or the system collapses. So the minute we keep going back to, we need economic power, or we need political power, or we need power that's predicated on our allegiance to one another. You use the words relationship, trust, and our cultural cohesiveness, right? Because that's the glue of everything. And we keep trying to build an edifice without cementing it or gluing it together with really, at the end of the day, trust, relationship, and a mutual intentionality towards our sovereignty. See, that's the thing. Once we declare that the work that we're trying to do is to lead us towards sovereignty and not necessarily towards ours, that's a different set of work. And so we're trying to fit a conversation about power and freedom, but in the same context of trying to play on the plantation that we need to break free from. And the two really can't occupy the same space. We're trying to have a free man's conversation and playing by massive man's rules. They don't occupy the same spaces, so we're deluding ourselves. The language would be different if we're talking about sovereignty. Because in sovereign mindset, we don't participate in the thing that has clearly shown all it's going to do is reshackle us. We vote. We ain't free. So it don't lead to freedom. That science experiment has been concluded. We need to stop recycling it. Let's figure out another algorithm that might lead us to freedom, because clearly voting is not it. You're on mute.
Yeah, I got to stop doing that. But I like to keep the mics quiet because it makes the sound a lot better. But Brother Jabari, it's on you, sir. What are your thoughts?
I think that I've heard some really powerful comments from all of the brothers that spoke before me. I think that one of the challenges I would have, though, is that we have to get to the point where we are focusing on Black politics and not Black voting. That's what we have to do. We have to focus on Black politics and not Black voting. It is correct that Black folks per capita vote at very high rates, but the problem is we have no control over the selections in most instances. We've come to the game at the end of the game. We've gotten to the restaurant and looked at the menu and said, how come my favorite meal is not on here? And it's like, somebody else created the menu. You're just a diner. And so we have to get to the point where I think that there are cadres, there are groups of people in communities that are talking about the needs of Black people, talking about how they will actually influence politicians, laws, regulations, and practices. And I would like to see those groups not be Democratic or Republican. Now, let's be clear. For the most part, one party has taken itself entirely out of the sphere of Black influence, because they've been playing footsies with white supremacists for far too long. So it's really hard to get with Republicans in most places. But I do believe that when we have these groupings of Black folks in communities that are talking about the things that they need, we should sit down and not be beholden to any party. For the most part, we'll probably be negotiating with the Democratic Party, but we need to negotiate with the Democratic Party. Not simply just agree to go to the voting booth. We need to say, these are the things we want. These are the things that we must have. And if you want us to do something, then you have to do A, B, C, D. And these people need to be in place. If you want to see someone throw their power around, look at how Black women told the president, the person that was likely going to be the president of the United States, that he had to have, for the first time, a female vice president that was of African descent. We've never seen a female vice president before. And if you look at the dialogue that was occurring after it seemed very clear that Joseph Biden was going to get the Democratic nomination, Black women that had very big platforms said, listen, we're not going to vote for you unless you have someone at the table at the vice presidential level that represents us. They were very clear. In fact, I was stunned at how blatant they were. I'm talking about folks like Susan Rice, who was in the running, by the way, that just said, look, if you want to vote, you have to have one of us there, or you get no vote. All of a sudden, there was a Black female vice president. Now, I'm not saying that means that means that we've arrived. I'm saying that we have tested our ability to make a demand which absolutely had to be responded to. I don't think we're making enough demands. And so these groups, these cadres in communities must gather to talk about the things that we need. I think it was William Clay that said that we have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interest. A powerful Black politician. We need to get to the point where we gather and say, this is what we want. These are the rules we want. These are the laws we want. These are the personalities, the politicians we want. And if we don't get it, then you don't get it. And it's that simple. The problem is we think that just going to the booth is the end, and that's not how it works.
Dua, thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Beloved Baba Dr. Jeffries, can you please provide some insights on this discussion we're having, this current discussion we're having?
Well, I think I'm glad that we have decided to mix our various interests together. We were initially moved by the work that you and others helped us do, and the inspiration we got from the Dr. John Henry Clarks and Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop and Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen, and our sisters that were interested in the ancient cultures in the Nile Valley and the marvelous work that African peoples did in the river valleys of the world. And so focusing on the great figures of our struggles and our history. So it's great that we're not just in the Nile Valley and satisfied with having this exposure to what African people have done and what they have the potential of continuing to do at an even greater rate. So now we can look at the greatness of the ancients and say, wait a minute, this is something that we can go way beyond them because of the technology and because of the circumstance, because the movement of people around the world are coming together around various important issues and whatnot. So for us to have the ability to deal with the beginnings of humankind, the evolution of human development, the laying the foundations for ancient civilizations and culture, and survive the devastations of these cultures, and then continue the growth process into the modern era, and then do as we have to do, project what the years to come are going to be about. So we're not back in the Nile just satisfied with the great work, or we're not reading about the struggles and the sacrifices our people made in struggling to be in America and places like America and the Caribbean and in South America. But we now can project what type of society we would like to have our people be a part of. What type of mix do we think is important for us to have. And so, as we mentioned, these great authors, men and women that are a part of our experience, they, if you read their deep work, projected us way past what we might have thought, just sharing a voting process with European and other people. Now we're forced to look even deeper because the Asians are coming at our world and they're not taking prisoners. There's a book by Howard, French, I believe his name is, that Africa is Asia's second continent. 1 million or more Chinese are in Africa, not to play chess and ping pong, but to lay the foundations for a Chinese takeover, if you will, or domination of the richest part of the planet in terms of mineral resources and other power equations. So I think that you have to be congratulated of taking the HAPI Nile Valley experience and now letting us look at it worldwide and projecting where we have to go in order to be truly successful. So Madasi P in the language of our Africans from Ghana, thank you for the work that you're doing.
God damn it. One of the things we want to mention in terms of the spirit of HAPI, what HAPI represents, and someone actually made the comment about a few minutes ago about one of our biggest downfalls is the lack of unity. And HAPI in it of itself symbolizes unity. And the HAPI movement for us is about unifying different conceptualizations of Black people in terms of how we think, how we feel, because we're not all going to agree on things. And this panel is definitely an example of that. But there are some very fundamental things that we do agree upon, and we need to unify and come together. So the HAPI movement is essentially an execution of the unification of Black people. And we see the glyph of HAPI is the tying together of the papyrus and lotus plants, symbolizing that unity, or what we like to call African union and African unity. So we got to move forward in that spirit. So that's the things that we do here on HAPI, in HAPI. And with that in mind, Councilmember Benson, much is said about corruption in politics and how it impacts the community. Do you feel, in your opinion, do you think that the corruption is designed to prevent the Black community from moving forward?
I got to say no, but then I'm also going to ask, what are you saying on your definition on corruption here? What do you mean by that? You mean people on the take? Do you mean people not working? I mean, what do you mean?
You're muted,
Taki. You back on. Yep.
I'm just going to stop muting my mic because I keep forgetting to turn it back on. Just in the sense of lobbyists, people have certain agendas that control certain politicians that want to keep certain other groups marginalized or disenfranchised. Do you believe that there's an agenda designed to keep us disenfranchised or marginalized?
An agenda that would mean that I have to go to my conspiracy theories and think that there are people who are actively looking to keep us down. I'm sure there are, but I also just got to say there are people out there who are just doing their 9 to 5, looking to get by, looking to feed their families, and their job is to support a certain constituency. And that constituency may not even look like them. And so I am sure that there are people who are out there actively seeking to keep and marginalize Black people. But by and large, I think that people are working in the best interest of their own communities and people who are paying them. Now, the question is, are we doing that as a people? Are we making sure that we have the lobbyists there looking after our best interests, and that we are making sure that the people that we're providing resources to those who are put in positions of power to look after us? Are we doing that? And Jabari talked about that earlier. He said, you know what, instead of having the local developers who are moving in and gentrifying our neighborhood, having fundraisers for the local elected official, my friends and I are having fundraisers for our elected local official to make sure they understand what our priorities are and what we want them to do. So are we the waited on, or are we the waiters? That's what's going on there.
Okay. Thank you for that. Brother Shomari, you want to respond to that question?
The question about corruption, or give me a reset.
Well, in your opinion, do you feel like there's corruption in politics that prevents the Black community from moving forward?
I need to move politics away from its general meaning and go back to what I think we're talking about as we're talking about electoral politics in this context. And by definition, of course, politics is a function of the society in which it's situated. This is a corrupt society. Its chief corruption is genocide and enslavement, and it is still committed to reaping the benefits and the allotment from that corruption. So its political system, which we are trying to, for some reason, participate in, is predicated on the corruption that is its original sin. That has never changed. There's no civil war, there's no reform legislation that has ever changed that reality. So again, I'm not trying to be an asshole. Sometimes I think we have question marks around stuff that's clearly already been answered. I don't know why we keep asking questions about that's a big ass exclamation point that's already on this particular point. So I always get confused when, particularly our brothers, like we men, we should be we got to be clear about the war. Like we look for unity, but we also need clarity, because you can't unify with everything. And so we got to really start taking the time and having these disciplined, maybe even hard conversations to get clear, because we're unifying and offering our energy and our spirit to stuff that is taking us down the wrong path. And what happens is after that, people get fatigued because they don't think we can win. And it's not that we're not putting forth the right effort, is that we have almost now 150 plus years of putting so much effort towards this idea that our key plank towards freedom is this vote or this participation. Because it's not just the vote. What they have us on across the board, whether it's economics or whatever, is we believe that participating is freedom. That's the big algorithm that we're messing up on. I don't care whether it's economic participation, cultural participation, educational participation, voting participation. The big conundrum we have right now that we have to be clear about is that we have brought into this idea that participating is an advancement towards freedom for us. And that's the biggest quandary that we have to dispel. We really have to have the audacity to be autonomous and to delink from a lot of the things that we're craving to participate in. That's the mindset that's going to get us towards freedom. This joint is corrupt by definition. You got to point. I'll give you the Rorschach test here, and I'll be quiet. The minute you say politician, what's the first word that comes to your mind? I rest my case.
So I just want to
Taki, can I just interject real quick right there?
Sorry, no
offense taken. But I do want to say the reason I call myself a legislator is because the term politician has such a negative connotation when you say it. It is just a negative connotation. So I much rather call myself a legislator. And if I am so lucky to become an executive, i.e. a mayor or a county exec, then I will like to be known as an executive versus a politician. It's just, you're absolutely right. It has a negative connotation.
I don't know how he got muted.
I got muted somehow, but this has a very negative connotation.
Okay, thank you for that. I want to go back to Brother Shomari for a second, because you said something, and I just want you to elaborate on it, if you will. Autonomous. How do we achieve an autonomous system or an autonomous way of being in this state we're in?
I mean, I think that you have to declare that that's your intention. And then I think you got to pick the areas. Like, you know, for me, I think that there are 5 areas. I've been asking this question to people for a while. You know, I call it village building. Like, what's the 5 core areas of village building that we have to be autonomous in, and then wrap an infrastructure of protection around this autonomy? And, you know, not in any particular order, but it always comes back. The answer is we got to be able to provide our own social services. When we're in need, at some level, we got to be able to answer those calls for need. And we saw with COVID, I saw Black people lined up around the corner trying to eat. So we in a bad situation as it relates to our ability to provide and be our own source of the services and supports that we need for each other, whether they're health, whether they're material, whether they're spiritual, emotional, whatever. Another aspect of that, which is the one that I focus on, not because I think it's important, it's just the area I'm in. We got to have, you know, independent means of communication, information sharing, our own way of being entertained, because we're literally being entertained to death, and our own systems of learning, independent cultural, you know, the exchange of data information, because Gil Scott Heron said the revolution will not be televised. But the revolution must be taught, and it must be socialized. And we got to have independent, autonomous ways of teaching what it means to be revolutionary and to seek your own sovereignty and autonomy. Another area we got to have is our own internal autonomous conflict resolution processes. Self-protection, justice, and government should be done at a cadre, community, village level. We call 911 again because we participate more than any other group. And then we whine while we get shot by cops. We invite them to police us. They're corrupt because they are adherents to this social order. Their job is to destroy us and contain us. And we invite them to do their job every time we push 911 as our first line of justice and governance and defense. But we don't, like right now, there are people like, oh, that's that revolutionary talk. And their whole soul is shaking because we have not made this the norm of how we engage one another in our communities. The other area, which I agree with everybody, is eco, to the extent that eco just means the control of your habitat. We got to control the ecology of the spaces and places where we live. I don't even know in 2021 if we could. I mean, Sister Felicia might be the only Black person I know that still live in Harlem. You know, so clearly we're out of control of the habitat. You know, my people in Bed-Stuy. I went to Bed-Stuy a couple months ago. I was like, yo, where did this come from? So clearly everywhere we live is under assault. So we have to control that. And last but not least, and the big one for me, but it's probably the most abstract, our children don't have any place where they can be Black children and be safe and dream and aspire what it means to be African and to be free. So much so that when Wakanda came, you would have thought it was the second coming of whoever's Messiah matters, right? Because somebody else controls their aspiration. And so they wrote an integrationist story and they made that our Afrofuturism. I want to say that one more time. They wrote an integrationist story where at the end of it, literally this king invites the State Department and all of its purveyors to come in and take their resources. And then that becomes the aspiration of what our children aspire to. And then gets defined as our sense of Afrofuturism. We have to control those narratives. We have to control that socialization. And yes, in order to be free as Black people, that's a revolutionary act in this culture. We got to start understanding that. We're not going to get free through reform. We ain't going to reform our way into freedom. If we want to be free, that is a revolutionary act. And we got to stop being scared of that word and that reality, because the minute we back up from that, we have compromised our integrity. We have compromised our mission. We have compromised our ancestors. And we got to just stop doing that. If we want to be free, there's work we have to do. And that's the conversation to get to that work has to change, in my opinion. We got to have a different language. We got to stop running from the things that we got to embrace. We got to become clear about this work so that we can train our people for the work that we must do.
Brother Shomari, thank you, sir. Jabari, I see you smiling, sir. You know I'm coming to you. What are your thoughts?
Real quick, gentlemen, can I interject here, Jabari? I apologize. It is late for me. I got to get out of here, guys. And I just want to say thank you. This has been a fantastic evening. I really appreciate all these great thoughts and learning so much. If I'm not mistaken, Jabari, we may know some similar people, maybe a guy named Henry Arthur Callis. I'm not sure if that's true, or Eugene Kinkle Jones, but just wanted to say an A5, brother. This is fantastic. Thank you all. Hope to get invited back. Have a good evening, everybody.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
See you soon. I think that I have heard some passionate pleas here, and they're powerful. I mean, powerful. And you know, I find myself as I've always seen myself as a revolutionary, but I also see myself as a pragmatist, right? And I know very well I share the same concerns that Brother Shomari has about us being integrated into the system, but I also recognize that we don't currently have the organization to create systems that are our own. So we're going to have to say that we're not only going to create our own systems, but we're going to take control of the systems that control our lives. Because the reality is, we can create a black town, but that doesn't mean that a black town is not going to be beholden to the laws of the United States. You know, there were over 60, and most people don't know this, but, you know, I teach an African-American history course. It's starting tomorrow. Some of you need to take it. Not someone on the panel. No, in the audience. Why? Do you know that there were over 60 self-sufficient black towns after the Civil War? Did you know that? One of them had songs made. I mentioned Mound Bayou. Who's ever heard of Mound Bayou? You know there were songs, R&B songs about Mound Bayou. Do you know that? Nicodemus is still independent. It's very small and struggling. There are many towns that black people created that are completely and totally for black people. In fact, some of these towns, I have pictures of folks in Mound Bayou. When white folks would come take pictures of them, you should see how they look. They look like, don't be taking no pictures of me. It was meant to be a black town and only a black town. And I want you to be clear that we built economies in those towns. So it's not that black folks have not done this. Sometimes I think we get frustrated because we think that there's something we haven't done. But are you expecting your oppressor to tell you about your successes? Is that what you're expecting? Would you think you were going to read that? We've had many successes. No group of people have moved further in the last 100 years than black folk. Nobody. In fact, the folks at the Schomburg got audacious and called it the Africana age. That black folks have been the most successful in the last 100 years. Now, of course, we were at the nadir of human civilization. So that it was hard for us to have less. But I want to be clear that we have had many examples of black self-sufficiency. There were 20 black self-sufficient towns in Oklahoma alone. Did you know that? All in Oklahoma. How about look at the story of Pap Singleton, a man that went all over the nation, bringing people to black towns, paying for them to travel to black towns. We don't know these names. We have lots of successes. But the reality is that economics alone will not do it, because you have to understand the economic environment is actually predicated by the political environment. Do you know that the Democrats right now are talking very seriously about a billionaire's tax? If they are successful, billionaires will be taxed. I doubt they will be successful because billionaires also have the control of politicians. Because as you know, to run successfully, it takes money. And we're not donating. We're not controlling elected officials. So they have to get money to run from someplace else or lose. So that's the reality that we have. But recognize that this political system might do something that just a few years ago sounded ludicrous. They might tax billionaires and folk for what they consider not just their income, because that's the trap that the tax system has. They tax people's income. They're going to be taxing, if they are successful, their assets. Because what billionaires do is they don't take any income. They just take loans on their assets and pay them. So they get, in fact, they get money back from the government. We don't even understand that game. The only way that's going to change is if groups of people make it plain and clear, and we force our politicians to do that. That's how it works. So politics cannot be irrelevant. We have thought, in some instances, the masses of Black people think that voting is politics. Voting is just part of politics. We have to decide the agenda. When we say what is a Black agenda, that is politics. Politics how you get your interest met through the rules and regulations of the society that you live in. That's all it is. That's all it is. Economics and politics are not separate. They're the same thing. They are the same thing. And so we have to get to the point where we are going to not just do things for ourselves, but be in control of all of those mechanisms that sit on top of the states that we live in. Because I do not believe that we are going to have independent Black states in the United States that are not connected to the rest of the nation, at least not anytime soon. Now, if y'all are about to do that tomorrow, could you please send a brother an email? Because I want to move, but still, you had better know, I don't think we're there yet. We're going to need to be in control of the systems that have control of our lives, while we also create mechanisms in our communities that support our interests.
So, Brother Jabari, you spoke about these independent states. I just want you to, if you can, give us a quick geography lesson on Nicodemus, Mudbound, where these places located, because these are places I'm sure that a lot of people in the audience have never heard of.
That's right.
We know Greenwood was in Tulsa. We know that. We know about Rosewood in Florida, but where did some of these other places? Where were they located? Where are they located?
Now, these occurred, that's a really good question. These occurred after the Civil War. The Black folks actually had some success in both economics and politics for a moment. But then white folk actually got the best of the political environment because it was a very close election. And so the Democrats and Republicans made a deal to sell out Black folks. That's what happened. By the way, at that time, it was the Republicans that sold out Black folks because most Black people were Republicans at that time. Radical Republicans. Okay. Yeah, I bet you thought I was saying, see, the Democrats sold us out again. Those were the Republicans that time. And so you better understand they made this deal and created what is usually called the post-Reconstruction era, a painful era in Black history that we ought to study.
Better, yes.
And so at that point, groups of Black folks said, we gonna create our own and not worried about anything. And they created many towns. I mentioned Nicodemus. Nicodemus is in Kansas, and it still exists. Nicodemus is still there and still Black. It is struggling. It is struggling. We should actually go into Nicodemus as a nation, Black folks all over, and say we're going to make this a prosperous town. Not because it's anywhere near where most of us live, but because it needs to be prosperous, because it is a symbol for our ability to be self-sufficient. How about Allensworth, California? I have a whole list of them in my class. Black Dom, New Mexico. Clearview, Oklahoma. Mound Bayou, Mississippi. There were songs about Mound Bayou. Mound Bayou, Mississippi. In fact, you should know that Booker T. Washington visited there all the time and talked about how powerful they were. Tulsa, Oklahoma. We've heard about Oklahoma. Bully, Oklahoma. Langston, Oklahoma. Hobson City, Alabama. Rettiesville, Oklahoma. There were many, many, many places that were entirely Black. They were completely run by Black folks. And many of them don't exist anymore. So what I'm saying is that we need to be in control. Most of them were economic dynamos, by the way. We need to be in control of both the political sphere of our lives, the economic sphere of our lives, and the spiritual sphere of our lives. If we're not able to do all of those things, we're going to find that our enemies will find a way, a route to defeat us. And that does not mean that we've lost those struggles. I hope you understand that this is a war, and sometimes you win battles and sometimes you lose them. If you look at the whole framework of the history of the African American, we are winning. We have won, but we have to recognize that there is so much more work to do. So many of us don't realize we're in a war. So we just sitting on the sidelines and people got guns pointed at us.
Right.
That's the problem. And so we must continue to work diligently during this era to be able to get the things that we weren't able to in the last era.
Brother Jabari, I'm wondering
just real quick, Shomari, before you go there, I just want to ask Jabari one more question. Jabari, you mentioned the term economic dynamos. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. These were villages that actually, many of them said, what we're going to do is we're going to take one industry and we're going to master it in our area. We're going to take one industry and we're going to master it. We'll control everything that comes through. In fact, one of those towns, Mound Bayou, they said, well, we're going to need to do that, but we also have to move our things. We're going to open up our own post office. We're going to have our own banks. There were black banks, black post offices, black businesses all throughout. And I'm going to tell you that in these instances, we had lots of success. But here's the deal. If you don't know we've had success, then you think we've only had failure. Who does it benefit to think that we've only failed at what we think we should do? Don't you understand that the idea that we failed at this is part of what we're struggling against? We've had many examples of success. Many examples of success. The very fact that we destroyed our chains. Good white folks didn't let us out of slavery and say, I think we did something wrong. Let's let those brown folks out. That's not what happened. Africans destroyed their chains. We actually took the world's most powerful globalization system and made it completely untenable. We did that. You think Lincoln said, you know what, this is wrong, y'all. We need to do the right thing. I'm on my way to heaven. That's not what happened. Lincoln thought that Africans were inferior, and his plan was after the Civil War to actually deport black people to Central America to create an American colony in Central America. That was his plan. If he wasn't killed, maybe we would be speaking Spanish from Honduras, Brother Taki. But black folks fought against that. There's a story of him inviting black pastors, flea black pastors, to the White House. And then he said, wait, I can't invite black people to the White House. Then he invited them off of the grounds of the White House. And this is when the tide of the Civil War had turned. Why did the tide have turned? The North was losing the Civil War. The North won the Civil War because they allowed black soldiers to fight. And now the South had to fight on two fronts. They would run off and fight a battle, and they'd say, wait a minute, there's a lot of black folks that we have enslaved at home. You mean that when the soldiers leave, the black people, they're going to burn down the town? We did that on many instances. As soon as the soldiers left, we said, okay, they're gone. We taking over. That's what happened. And so when they had to fight the war on two fronts, the North won. But before the North actually wins, Lincoln says to these black pastors, how about you go to Central America? And they were enraged, refused. Many of us don't know that story. And so it was black folks that destroyed our chains, black folks that said we were not going to go to Honduras or someplace else, black folks who actually fought for laws to be more equitable black people now. We're in a place where, for the most part, the laws of the United States operate as if race is not part of the equation. Now, the problem is you can't just try to create something that's race neutral after 250 years of enslavement and degradation. That's like me beating you up and you're disheveled, and then we say, let's have a heavyweight boxing match. That's what's happened. So we have a lot more work to do. We definitely have a lot more work to do.
Do I? Thank you, sir. You know, brother Shomari, I was actually getting ready to come to you because I have a question here for you.
Mm-hmm.
I know you wanted to add on to the discussion here, but I just want to give you this question, and then you could put that in your back pocket.
Mm-hmm.
I give you can answer the question however you want to do. Which one first?
Sure.
So we know from your position here, essentially, that you don't necessarily believe in you don't believe in the system of voting and things like that. It's clear. But can you give us an example, in your opinion, what good politics looks like? Now you can answer it now, or you can say what you're going to say and then come back and deal with it.
And it's funny because I was actually going to ask Brother Jabari a question, but I think that his offering actually sums it up for me, because a lot of what people might have heard him say, they might say that, that's economics. But no, that's politics. People made a decision to be free. And then they created a polity or polis or city or an environment or an ecology over which they were sovereign. And then they added, and again, we use the word like maroon communities, but that's the essence of it. We always said the Maroons were runaway slaves. No, that's not what maroonage was. That's step one. But then you have to create and command a space and declare a space. And then you create rules within that space based on your culture, your spiritual system. A lot of the maroon communities were created so that they could hold on to African culture, hold on to African economic systems. And so that thinking, when I say the revolution won't be televised, but it must be taught, that's what we have to teach. Because what happens is we get locked. I saw them do it over the last 2 years with the 1619 Project. We get locked into this paradigm that our greatest effort is to participate in a society that used to discard us. And that literally becomes the aspiration of many of us, because we don't know about the towns, the homesteads, the literal cities that African people created and sustained for long periods of time. And some of them are still standing, right? They're struggling. I contend that we need to have triple citizenship. We need to have, whatever African country you want to be a citizen of, cool. I think we need to find these existing or declare existing African spaces within America and make sure that they stay prospered up. And then I also think we need to reclaim Haiti as the Pan-African citadel and make sure that that country remembers that it's not just Haiti, some nation state. It is the place where the culmination of Pan-African revolutionary thought was most enacted, and all Africans across the globe need to make sure that that space and place stands strong. I think that we need to declare citizenship all across that in a Pan-African way, and then begin to bring the politics, economics, education, or as Francis Cresswell's, the areas of people activity. Education, economics, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, war, add science and technology to the mix, and health. And again, just where are the spaces and places where that becomes the rule? Because all of that is politics, just like all of that is economics, just like all of that is all of that. And so what he laid out is the political dream. I don't care whether you want to call it maroonage or sovereignty or Pan-Africanism, but the declaration of non-participation in this BS. That's what Marcus Garvey brought us when he said the Declaration of the Human Rights of the Negro People was, nah, we got our own flag. We're going to make our own song. We're going to make our own rules. And that mindset has to be taught again, because that's what's been stripped away from us for a very long time. And we have it. That's what Malcolm was reaching for as he perished. He was reaching for a new set of rules that make us African wherever we are and in connection with Africans wherever they are. That's the mindset we got to bring back. That's the politics of the mind that we have to bring forward.
Thank you. So, in your opinion, that's what good politics looks like.
That's good politics, baby.
Hey, family, please like, comment, and share. Get the information out. Very important. And also, you can take this opportunity to support the channel. $sign hapifilm or super chat. Definitely want to keep this going. This is a powerful discussion, as you see. I also want to add that the individuals on this panel tonight, at least 3/4 of them, will be in Philadelphia this weekend for the HAPI screening at the Venice Performing Arts and Recreation Center, 7 Lock Street, Philadelphia. Please go to hapifilm.com to get your tickets. Brother Shomari, the powerful Brother Shomari, as you hear here, he will be the moderator. Brother Jabari Osaze will be on the panel. So will Dr. Leonard Jeffries. So will Felicia Harden, and Brother Mfudishi Jehuti Mez, that we all know and love, will also be there in the house, in the building this Saturday. Definitely want to get your tickets. Also, we want to mention, and I'm going to bring Jabari in here to talk about something after we go to this next clip. One of the things we speak about very poignant here tonight is power. And what does power look like for us? Is power just having an economic base? Is power both having just a political base? Or is power for Africans or other people for that matter, the combination of them all? So we want to understand what power looks like from a political standpoint. And we always like to go back to HAPI to show examples of how this message is communicated. So with that, we're going to play.
You know why I wanted to be a politician in a time when we disenfranchised? Because of power. Power. We could talk all the talk we want. You can walk all the miles you want to walk. You better have some power. That's why I got into the electoral arena. Because you are disenfranchised, then you need to enfranchise yourself with power. We need to not leave any field uncontested in our fight for our liberation. And the electoral arena is certainly one that has power. When I can bring in 6,000 units of real affordable housing, you can't go nowhere in New York City and get a studio apartment for the homeless that have subsidized rents for $215 a month. I was able to secure our movement out here, Operation Power, apartments for people who make $25,000, $35,000, $45,000. That's the area median income of my neighborhood. For people who are making $45,000, $50,000, 3-bedroom apartment, $800, $900. Man, some people are paying $1,500 for a studio. So we were able to secure all that. Why? Because I was in politics. I was the council member. And when a developer came to me to tell me what was affordable for my neighborhood, and they said he'd build an affordable housing, I said, affordable to who?
We want to give a shout out to the Honorable New York State Assembly member, Charles Barron, for that powerful message there, and HAPI. All these clips we show tonight are actually from the film. For those who have not seen it, like I said, we have several screenings coming up. Philadelphia, following Philly will be Washington, D.C., which will be on December 5th. And we will be doing that screening in conjunction with the IKG Cultural Center with our beloved scholar and elder, Anthony Brada. He will be there also sharing the space with us and doing a powerful presentation. We're following that up with December 11th in Atlanta. Definitely go to hapifilm.com, get your tickets. After Atlanta, on December 11th, the following week will be Bridgeport, Connecticut. Then we'll, after the new year, we'll be in Houston, Texas. We had to change the date to Houston. Houston was originally going to be on the November 6th, but Houston now is January 9th. All tickets available at hapifilm.com. This screening in Philadelphia is very special because we also have the co-sponsoring of this event with the restoration for the Center of Ma'at with Jabari Osaze and the tour to the Penn Museum and how and its significance to this overall discussion. And Jabari, you want to chime in on this?
Absolutely, absolutely. So at 2:30 on Saturday, we're actually going to have a tour of the Penn Museum's African and Kemetic and Nubian collection. And I know that there's so many people who have not seen that collection. When I go to cities, and you know, Philly is a Black city. I do a lot in Philly. My wife and I have businesses in Philly, right? I mean, if there was a place in the United States that we would live other than Harlem, it would be Philly. We do a lot in Philly. And I'm going to say to you that as Black as Philly is, when I do tours of the Penn Museum, very often the folks that are from Philly that come say, we did not know this was here. And the same thing, I just got back from Atlanta doing the tour of the Carlos Museum. The folks in Atlanta say, we didn't know this was here, because those folks that have control of those artifacts are not letting you know that they got your stuff, Black folks. It does provide us, however, an opportunity to study the history, the legacy of African people. And so when we go to the Penn Museum, you're going to see the third largest Hieromarket that has been misnomered the Sphinx in the world. The third largest is in the museum. I know folks that are into the sort of the esoteric, I am as well, the esoteric description of Kemet sometimes. And they say, do you think that Kemetic folks had light bulbs? They talk about something in a tomb all the way near Beni Hassan. Do you know that that same image is in Philadelphia? I'll show it to you. I want you to understand that the artifacts at the Penn Museum are incredible, and we ought to see them. And so I'm honored to be able to lead a tour there. I haven't done a tour there because of the pandemic in about 2 years. And I'm really excited that we're going to get a chance to not just see those artifacts, but to pair it with this dynamic panel. Saturday is going to be powerful, I'm telling you, to have the tour, the panel. We're going to be celebrating Black excellence and charting the description of what we must do to actually reach where we need to go going forward. That's the thing that HAPI does, I think, more powerfully than any documentary that I've ever seen. There are documentaries that are historic documentaries that are amazing. There are many of them. Well, not as many made by us, but there are a few of them. But HAPI has the nerve, Brother Taki, not just to leave you in the history, but to say, well, now what? There is no other documentary that does that. So you have to be part of this. You have to. If you are anywhere near Philadelphia, if you can get on your mule, get in a car, walk, whatever you can do, you need to be here for this event on Saturday, because I'm going to be all excited, and you're going to see the folks that are part of this panel plus more. So please be there.
So we're going to share there's actually special tickets that we have that actually have a combination of for the tour and also for the screening. We're going to put that link in the chat. And for those who are interested, please take this opportunity to share that link and also utilize that link and get the tickets to going on the tour to the Penn Museum and also be at the Venice Recreation Performing Arts Center for the HAPI screening that will start at 6:30. So you can get a package deal entrance fee with the link. We're going to put that in the chat momentarily. Dr. Leonard Jeffries, sir, I know it's been some time, and I want to come to you now because one of the things that Brother Jabari said some time ago is that we're winning. And I've heard you say this many times throughout the years, we're on a victorious path. Mm-hmm. And throughout several of your lectures, you speak of this victorious path. You speak of this last 50 years, 50-year turning point that we as African people have had. Can you please expound upon that?
Well, certainly be able to give you some of that, but we'd be here for another couple of hours into that process. But Dr. John Henry Clark, my mentor, and he was one of the great spirits moving among us. He did a work on Christopher Columbus and the slave trade. And he asked me to do an intro, and he specifically wanted it done because he was, as a historian, he looked at history over the long period. For him, looking at a 500-year period was significant to see the historical reaction. Well, being someone trained in the political science, I thought the 50-year turning point was more significant. So I have been looking at history, these key 50-year turning points of history, using the pyramidal shape again of the triangle. You would have a 500-year period. That's the period of Amenhotep III, Queen T, Akhenaten, when they had that change that took place in the Nile Valley. and it led to different changes in Nile Valley culture. Then as you come to another historical period, you come to the Columbus era, and there's a 50-year turning point of history in terms of the Europeans leaving their icebox in Europe and getting involved and moving around the world and getting the Pope to divide up the world and give half of it to Europe and half of it to other groups. So that was when the European got his ability to move through the world with power. But in our era, the 50-year turning point of history has been 1945 for me, the Pan-African Conference, through all of the changes, the victorious struggles that we've waged from that period, which would include the marches on Washington, include the Million Man marches, the Women's March, which would include the consciousness that has been raised around the world with these international conferences, the international organization. That's enormous intensity of change and victorious activity is what we need to begin to institutionalize in so many ways. And the symbol of that is what I have in my hands here. I was glad when our brother raised the question of the Black towns, because I had a chance to travel throughout the South, and we went through New Orleans and got on to Mississippi and Alabama. And we were going through a visit to see this Black town, Mount Bayou. And so, of course, we were anxious to see this as a model of other towns. And who would be sitting down with the elders and the youngsters at his feet, speaking about history? Dr. John Henry Clark in Mount Bayou. I have to have a tape of that somewhere. But these are the working processes that we have, that victorious process. And this 50-year turning point of history, 1945 to 1995, is when so much of the activity that we're talking about has actually taken place for the modern era. And this, for me, symbolizes it in an enormous way. It's the Renaissance monument that has been built in Senegal with the AU, the African Union, which was the transformation from the OAU that was started in 1963 and that was revised later and sharpened its mission. And that AU asked some of the leaders, such as the president of Nigeria and the president of Senegal and others, to take the lead in establishing a symbol of who and what we are. This is one of the most extraordinary monuments in the world, but for me, it represents what we've been trying to do of the great scholars and the great activists, the great revolutionaries, and the great women who have joined in the struggle. And so you have on a volcanic hill overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, the tallest statue of its kind. And it represents the rise of the Black man. And that Black man is not rising as a military hero. He's not rising as a great leader. He's rising as the head of the family that has to be a part of this awakening. Otherwise, it won't go anywhere. And that Black man is leaning on the shoulder of the Black female, the rock on which the family is built. And then he's holding up to the Creator the product of her sacred womb. And that young child is not playing with the father. That young child is not making non-meaningful statements. The young child is pointing not to north, to Europe, where we usually look to sustenance or other European-like settlements, such as the US, but he's pointing to the New World, where the African population in North America, South America, the islands of the Caribbean is heavily located. And that New World is where this great victory is actually finding fertile ground. And the young child represents our future. And then this monument is like no others. I took Mrs. Coretta Scott King and Marty III to the Zimbabwe War Memorial. I've taken others to Jesus the Redeemer overlooking Rio. I've taken others to the Statue of Liberty and raised questions about its origin. But this is something for our times. And you can go inside the monument, and there the great works of our scholars is located. For example, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop's oldest child, Mbeki, and his mother, a European who was interested in African history and geography and whatnot, they, with others, put together an exhibit under tents outside of the monument when it was opened, to the tune of thousands of us being there. We brought a 350 member delegation from the U.S. That exhibit includes the great works of Aimé Césaire, the great works of the leader of Cheikh Anta Diop, his mentor, Alioune Diop and Madame Diop, who set up the President's African think tank publishing house and a place where we can struggle together. And that process of these men was not put in a competitive way, but a family exposing this truth. So you walk inside the monument, and I have a picture of myself and others in there standing under the pictures of W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Kwame Ture, Sekou Touré, and the great leaders of the Haitian Revolution. It's an extraordinary experience to go inside a monument that puts your truth out there and says, this is the foundation upon which you build for the future. And so thousands of us were there for the celebration. And we need to have a visit to Senegal. If you go, you got the beaches in Dakar, you got the Gorée Island enslavement process. But if you fail to go to the Renaissance Monument, which speaks to where we need to go, you've missed something. And so for me, this symbolizes that future of coming together and that victorious path that we're truly a part of.
Hey, Doc, I want to come back to you with that because there's some questions I have actually in regards to the Renaissance statue. Brother Shomari, I know you've been here a long time with us tonight, and I'm sure we still have some ways, not that much longer to go, but do you have anything you want to, further add to the discussion? And you can stay if you want, but, if you have to go, you got any parting words for us?
I feel like I'm getting kicked out the house.
No, not at all. No, I just want to be considering your time. You can definitely stay.
So it's beautiful, ancestrally beautiful, that I literally just hung that print up in my studio, my office at home. That mine was nowhere as powerfully framed as yours was, Dr. Jeffries, but that imagery, I put it right on top of my library case at the house, literally just last week. So it's good to get that ancestral affirmation in this moment. And I wasn't planning on signing off, but I did want to ashe what Brother Jabari also offered. Like, I really think that, when I talk about the revolution needing to be taught, there's some things we've been taught that we have to reteach ourselves if we really want to work forward. And I think that what Reconstruction was and what we did coming out of Reconstruction, we get taught about the Freedmen's Bureau, and we get taught about the compromise of 1877 and the betrayal and all of that happened. But a lot of our ancestors made a decision to be autonomous and independent in the spaces and places where they were, or to go seek places where they could be autonomous and independent. And so this idea of the towns and stuff, that mindset was as powerful a mindset as the integrationist mindset coming out of Reconstruction, and literally figuring out how we're going to rewrite or rebuild who we are as a people. And I don't think we bring that forward a lot. So I really would love to figure out how to take some of this science that Brother Jabari and others have been talking about. We need to pull that forward, because that actually needs to be the defining narrative of who we are as Black people in America. Where this conversation ended today needs to be where every other conversation we have on this matter starts. That has to be our foundation, that we were a building people We reconstructed ourselves, and even in doing so, we were always under war and under assault, because that's what this country is, and we just got to deal with that at some point. And so, you know, I just really am excited about really going back and really pulling forward this autonomous, powerful definition of Reconstruction, and us resurrecting this sense of being a people who determine who we are economically, politically, culturally, spiritually. That needs to become the core of our character again. And I'm happy, you know, I'm happy about HAPI and this that we're. I like being reminded that we're winning, that we're still on a path and a push forward, because sometimes it's easy for us to forget that. And I appreciate this last 15 minutes of reminding us about that.
So, Brother Shomari, I just want to say we appreciate you, and you were very generous with your time today, and you kind of waited. You were the first one in, and I just felt really badly about having you wait like that. So
that's how y'all do it in New York, though, man. Y'all worldwide known that New York Black people time is a different. Y'all need to have your own time zone, to be honest with you, because y'all play by a whole different set of rules when it comes to time.
I can dig it. But no, definitely you are more than welcome to stay with us. I want to come back to Dr. J. Dr. J, when we hold up the Renaissance statue and I see it, I think of your pyramid analysis often, but the different aspect of the synthesis, antithesis, and the thesis. When I see the synthesis of it, I see the child. Can you relate the statue to economics, politics, and culture, and from a different perspective of how we see economics, politics? When we talk about money and politics, but that statue itself, does it reflect the pyramid analysis?
Well, certainly I think it does. And I'm glad that the group of scholars and serious brothers and sisters that we took to be a part of it made their contribution. In fact, the contribution was so fabulous that at each point it was an exposure of what we've learned. The president of Senegal was in charge of the activity with thousands of people there, and the different sessions. In the first session, he chaired it and explained that he had produced some outstanding works. Most of the Senegalese presidents have been scholars, whether you're talking about Senghor or you're talking about any of the others. They put a great deal in terms of the scholarship. But the beautiful thing was that the aide-de-camp of the President WURD whispered in his ear that, Mr. President, there are 7 heads of state waiting for you to come out to the airport to welcome them to Senegal. And they were a part of this activity. And so he realized he had to leave. And the dilemma was who would step into his shoes and who would sit in the chair to carry on. And he had held up the book by Runoko Rashidi dealing with Africans throughout the world. And he had been reading his other books. And so he said, based upon this great work by Runoko Rashidi, I would want him to take my seat as chair of this international enormous historic activity. And I said to myself, oh my goodness, I wouldn't want to be in that position without any preparation. But Runoko, because he had traveled around the world, he had been to so many places where it required great skill and courage and fortitude, Runoko stepped up and moved into the chair and carried on the conference until the president came back. And he brought somebody from the islands of the Pacific that he was able to introduce. And so it went on like that. Every session was an enormous activity. One of our great leaders, who was a partner of Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, the fellow Banga, he handled the next session. And again, he did it with this enormous experience of having been in Black America and then having related to the Caribbean and coming from the Southern Central Africa. He was also the partner of Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop. And he went higher and higher. And then the next person to handle a session was our brother, Dr. Wade Nobles. And later his wife, Dr. Vera, and my wife handled a session on health and spirituality. But Wade stepped in to the breach and took us high. And then, of course, I was lucky enough to have a session, since I was asked by Dr. Jabril Diallo to bring in the crew of our scholars to contribute to this great activity. And so I was able to go as high as I could in terms of bringing this knowledge that we've been empowered to carry. So that's why I say we're on a victorious path in ways that has never been conceived by Black folk. No matter how successful Garvey was, no matter how successful Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was, no matter how successful Dr. Du Bois was, and our great leader, Dr. Julius Nyerere, all of them have contributed as building blocks to this enormity that we now have of who we really are and how we can use that power to build for the future. So I'm working on cloud 9. And when you go into the statue, you go up the hill and the students sit on the steps as thousands of students as they have the big activities in front of the statue. But then when you get inside, you take an elevator 16 stories up to the powerful legs and thighs of the Black man, through his strong backbone and shoulders and into his head. And then you have a chance, 30 or 40 people can fit into his head looking out on the world. I'm telling you, African peoples, even though the statue was built by Koreans, because they build these monumental statues, including the one in Zimbabwe, but it was planned by Africans. It's for Africans, and it's a great tribute to Africa. And so just as we have this breakthrough in terms of Jesus the Redeemer, that was a statue created by the Italian Catholics to the largest Catholic nation in the world, Brazil. And so it's on this beautiful hill overlooking this beautiful city in this bay. But every couple of years we go to Brazil, and we always make sure that that's a stop that we make. But one of our trips, they had, for the first time, opened the base of the statue. And sitting in the base of the statue was the shrine of the Black Madonna. And so Jesus the Redeemer, this great tribute to European Catholicism, is standing on the shoulders of the Black Madonna. And luckily, my historian nephew, Dr. Hassan, was there with his wife and others, and they were able to film stuff while I'm not a film person, but I absorb it all. But so there is a great period where we're planning new cities of God, new cities of development. And Nkrumah tried to set the example. And even in Ivory Coast, they had a new city. Senegal was coming up with methods of development using the ancient examples and expanding. Charles knows our house.
But hey, Doc, before you get to the Black Madonna, I want to go back to, I don't want to get too far away from this, because this ties into the discussion of you mentioned the planning. You said Koreans built the Renaissance statue, but it was planned.
Koreans have this history of building these monumental monuments, but they did not conceive of it. They did not plan it.
Right. Okay. And that's the point. That's the point I was going to make. The planning and the conceptualization of it came from the African mind, and we know that. And just going back to the overall framework of this discussion, economics, politics, and culture, does that tie into the framework and the conceptualization of that statue?
It certainly does. For me, I've been around the world, and that's a crowning point for me to be in that mix and to be asked to bring over dozens of African American scholars to participate, and to have many of our leaders come, and then have thousands of children and other activities. So you can use, since we don't have the facility of building a monumental structure like that, so you pay the Koreans to do it, but it is your statue. It represents your spirit. It represents projection on your past as a foundation for your future.
So we see man, woman, and child, and looking at man, woman, and child, how does that fit into that construct of economics, politics, and culture?
Well, one of the things that when you go to the Nile Valley, you see that enormity of the human family, and you see the female figure in complementarity with the male figure, and the product of her sacred womb is the child. So throughout the great development, for example, I have in this house an enormous, in fact, you helped me get it, a woven tapestry of Queen Ty or T. And she is certainly one of the greatest women in the history of the world. And when we went to the carpet school, as you took us to the carpet school, they had pictures of all these other great women, but none of Queen T. So I gave them a photo. And the next year when we came, they had actually, the young carpet weavers had actually woven the image of Queen Ty. But you have Queen Ty, her great husband, Mamenoph III, and then the child of the sacred womb, the Pharaoh Akhenaten. You have that same tradition. And when you go to the great Abu Simbel, there's Ramses sitting with the great spiritual force, God force. But you are not only, they recarved and lifted up the monument several hundred feet, but you also have a double monument. You have, again, the female representation of the divinity, along with the relationship to the female deity. So, and then inevitably within the African sculpture and world, you'll have the children in the picture. This is unheard of. No one does that. You go into the Cairo Museum, the old museum, and in the great gallery, there was this enormous statue of Amenoph III and Queen T sitting in all majesty, but with them also at their on their legs were images of the children, the mother principle, the father principle, and the child, wedded into this culture coming from the various parts of the Nile. So we have to take advantage of what we've been blessed with.